Welcome to this episode of Connects, a live Q&A where students from around the state bring the questions to Washington state leaders and experts. We're very excited to have Governor Inslee as our special guest today. We're also joined by students from Corey Paulson's class at Open Window School, as well as Bethany Shota and Michael Dawson's students at Lake Washington High School. Hello and welcome, students, and thank you so much, Governor, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. The students are so thrilled to have this opportunity, and they've prepared some really thoughtful questions for you. And so with that, let's get right to it. Our first question is from Lake Washington. It's from Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia Todd. I'm a senior at Lake Washington, and my question is, when did you know that you wanted to work in government?
Well, I was a late bloomer. I never really thought about that till I was in my upper 30s in the 1980s. And I became interested in potentially serving after my wife and I ran a school bond issue back in 1986 or 87. We were in Selah, Washington, raising our kids in the Yakima Valley. And we got involved passing a school bond, which was very difficult because it had passed 6 times. And we finally passed it on the 7th try. And then the legislature started monkeying around with the funding formula, and they cut our funding of what the state was going to give to our little city. And so I got angry about that, frankly, and started raising heck in Olympia. And then decided if I was really going to do something about it, I should be in the legislature. Instead of just pounding on it from the outside, I thought I'd go on the inside and do some good work. So I ran for the legislature in 1988, and I won in an upset. I was a Democrat in a very Republican area. And then the rest is history. I served in the legislature 2 terms, in the U.S. Congress 1 term. Then I was defeated. Then I returned to Congress in 98 and then was elected governor in 2012. So that's my story. It's kind of a convoluted history, but it was kind of late in life, I guess. In my upper 30s, I thought that I could serve, and it's been very rewarding to serve in public service.
Well, our next question has something to do with the environment. Elle Christofferson from Lake Washington, take it away.
Hi there, my name is Elle Christofferson, and I am a senior at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question for Governor Inslee is, you focus largely on the environment, part of which is the reduction or the elimination of single-use plastic products. The reusable alternatives for these single-use plastic products are typically more expensive, and so my question for you would be, how do you intend to make sure that these products are accessible for all Washingtonians, and that Washingtonians of lower incomes are being included in this plan?
Good question. I think the best way to deal with this is to have an economic system where everyone can participate and have a reasonable income. And the way that we intend to help folks like this is in myriad ways that you don't associate with recycling, but have an impact to allow you to have enough take-home pay and support system to be able to afford things like this. And that includes providing access to health care. And the Obamacare was a way to reduce your health care expenses and providing health care. Right now in reconciliation bill in the U.S. Congress, I hope that the Congress is going to pass a measure to provide universal pre-K education, so you don't have to pay for that, and child care tax credits to support families with children, and higher minimum wages, which we have in our state, which I have supported to raise our minimum wage so that people's wages at the lower end of the ladder can go up. To have tax policies that don't put the tax burden on working people, but in fact put it in the higher income levels, as we've done with the initiation of a capital gains tax. To have different increased access to scholarships and higher education. We now have the richest system in the United States to provide scholarships and the like for people so they can go to higher ed. So we need to support working families in all of these different ways so that when there are higher costs that they're exposed to, whether it's for recycled products or otherwise, that they can ameliorate that and have an economic system that supports working people. So we need to do it in many, many ways. We are doing it in many, many ways, and we need to continue to do that in many, many ways. The Congress is not going to succeed in all of those measures. I just heard that we may not get the family medical leave through, but We have a good policy in Washington State. We need to make it national. So we need a new economic system. I would say we need a bigger answer to a smaller question. And I'm proud of some of the work we've done for recycling in our state. But we're not done. We have to technologically increase the availability of these new products. I was at Climate Pledge Arena when they opened it the other day. By the way, congratulations, Kraken. They just won their first home game. But they're inventing a new way to have compostable plastic. It's not really a plastic, but a material to wrap your food container in where it becomes compostable, which is going to reduce the cost as well. So we want to reduce the cost of these systems by bringing new technology as well. So hopefully some student is going to invent a new system that's cheaper too. I look forward to that.
From Open Window School, our next question comes from Wang.
Hello, Governor Inslee. I'm Wang from Open Window School. I saw that you made a statement on October 15th about exploring options to breaching the lower level Snake River dams in a report that should be available next summer. However, the killer whale population, a protected species that almost exclusively eats Chinook salmon, has been down to 74 as of this August. You haven't provided any input on the salmon wars, so do you personally think that the dams should remain in place? Do you think that breaching the dams will be enough to save the salmon population? And additionally, what made you completely change your mind from 5 months ago when you rejected Simpson's proposal?
Well, I can answer pretty simple questions. Breaching the Snake River dams will not be the full solution to the challenge the orca have or many of the salmon runs. We have so much more work to do beyond the Snake River dams, including increased habitat, nearshore habitat, more protection for our riparian areas, so we have trees to shelter and keep the water cool and provide shade. We need to reduce the toxicity of runoff that goes into the waters that provide toxin environments that makes it impossible for salmon to survive. And the grandmother of all problems of climate change, we have to beat climate change so that the climate does not make the waters too hot for salmon to survive. And we're approaching those levels right now, as well as the ocean acidification, which is threatening them both near shore and in their ocean life cycles, which is changing the acid level that could disrupt the whole food chain. So the Snake River dams are just one of the issues we have to work on. I should say that at the outset. I thought the Simpson proposal was premature in some respect. Here's what I think we need to do. We need to find a way to find ways to replace the Snake River Dam of the services that they do provide. Those who've objected to their breaching basically have said, well, what are we going to do to replace the transportation services, the barging of our wheat that goes on? What are we going to do to replace the transportation services? What are we going to do to replace the electrical supply system? Because it's a pretty renewable resource right now of low carbon electricity right now. What are we going to do to replace the irrigation services that the dams provide? We need answers to do that. And we need to scope out as rapidly as we can answers to those questions. And that's what Senator Murray and I have focused on. And we hope to have a report by next summer so that we can then move to make the appropriate decisions about this, which hopefully could have more confidence in the public of whatever decision that we make. And I'm glad to take this measure forward with Senator Murray. That's a short timeline to get answers to those questions. But as you've pointed out, we are up against it with orca survival, and that's why we've been insistent on a very short timeline to get answers to those questions. I think, was there a third question in there that I might have missed? I answered two, but was there three?
No,
I
thank
answered
you.
all the questions.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for caring.
Moving on to a question about COVID. Sagnik, go ahead with your question.
Good afternoon. My name is Sagnik Sinha, and I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question concerns COVID-19 protocols. According to the Department of Health, 40% of the Washington state population isn't fully vaccinated, and cases are highest in frequency among ages 14 to 19. What is the reasoning behind the current policy regarding student vaccination in secondary schools? What is the feasibility of implementing mandatory COVID-19 vaccination in secondary schools?
So our current thinking is we hope the science will improve to give us answers about safety of the vaccine at these age levels. As you know, the vaccine has been approved for final approval for those over 16. That's an FDA term of art. It has been given emergency use authorization for those 12 to 15, which is a preliminary step. And right now they are going through the scientific assessment that could give it, quote, final approval. In the next several days, we hope to have emergency use authorization for those 5 to 11 as well. So we're waiting for the FDA and CDC's decision-making for final approval in that regard. And hopefully that's going to happen sooner rather than later. At that point, we will presumably ask the appropriateness of having a mandate for school kids. And in making those decisions, we'll look at the FDA evidence. We will look at the feasibility of the schools actually implementing that mandate and look at the potential compliance or non-compliance with the mandate. Those are questions we'll be asking ourselves. So right now, we're happy that progress is being made. I'm extremely happy that we'll get emergency use authorization for 5 to 11-year-olds, and I have 2 in that category. So they're raring to go to get their vaccination, hopefully as early as next week. My 12-year-old grandson got it as soon as he could because he understands science, right? He follows science, and he understands this has been a rigorously evaluated vaccine, and he's convinced it's effective. And he's convinced it's safe, and I agree with him because he's a pretty smart 12-year-old. So we hope we move in that direction. We have to get more people vaccinated. It is the only way that we will get on top of this pandemic. It's the only way out of Dodge. So we have to increase our vaccination through all age groups, including these younger groups. And by the way, I may add, the health of these young people, I was going to say kids, but I could get in trouble if I said kids. Anybody age under 50 is kids to me, right? At my age, I was one of the flower children in the age of Aquarius in the 60s. So of younger people, their health is important, but it's not just their health, it's their parents and their grandparents and their uncles and their neighbors, because when young people are not vaccinated, they're more likely to be infectious and they can go home and infect other people. So everybody at age group has a stake in increasing vaccination rates of younger people. So I appreciate your question, Sagnik. I hope you'll be an advocate at the appropriate moment.
Our next question comes from Sonja.
Hi, my name is Sonja Vinh-Thomas, and I'm an 8th grader at Open Window School. I know that you recently put a vaccination mandate for state workers, school staff, and most healthcare workers in the state into place. I also recently learned that on various occasions there have been riots outside the state capitol where people have protested against your newly implemented requirements. I'm wondering, what were your initial responses and opinions to these protests? What is your approach to handling them if they do continue to happen in the future, and how do you believe that they should be addressed? Thank you.
You bet. Well, I have multiple responses. Number one, people have a right to peaceably protest. It's a First Amendment right. So if people want to express themselves in a peaceful way, this is an American right. It's enshrined under democracy. And so that's my first reaction to peaceful protests. I don't like non-peaceful protests because people can get hurt. So we are very hopeful that people remain civil and peaceful in expressing themselves. My other reaction is that it's not the majority of Washingtonians. The majority of Washingtonians believe the vaccine is safe and get the vaccine. This is a minority. And I don't know if I'm still with you. Am I still with you guys? Something just popped up on my set, says I've been blocked. Am I still with you?
You're good.
Good, okay. Well, the Russians are trying to hack into our system here, it looks like. So, the majority of Washingtonians want to get vaccinated. The majority of Washingtonians are vaccinated. So it's a minority group. The other response I have is that we try to provide as much information as we can to the group who are hesitant to get vaccinated. And I think we have been good at providing that information broadly through multiple avenues in many, many different languages, in all kinds of distribution networks. We have engaged people to go out to churches and clinics and farmers markets and to talk to people, to provide them scientific information. That's the best thing we can do. And it has had a positive impact. Unfortunately, people have been infected not just by the COVID virus, but frequently by the information virus. And the information virus is a pandemic on the internet. And we understand that. When you ask people why they've been hesitant, quite frequently they'll give you some crazy thing they heard on the internet, that it makes people sterile, or Bill Gates is behind it as a conspiracy to dominate the universe. Just nutso stuff. And it's really unfortunate and it's maddening. But people have read it on the internet. And unfortunately, we have been all too frequently become driven by the algorithms towards these crazy theories. You've heard the testimony most recently about Facebook, whose algorithms have worked to foster conflict and anger and hatred. That's what draws clicks. And their algorithms have driven people, unfortunately, to some of this information. Now, they've also made some efforts to try to ameliorate that. But because of the proliferation of these channels, people become very, very susceptible to misinformation because they have an algorithm that only feeds them misinformation, because that's what makes them angry or fearful. So this is a very insidious environment that your generation has grown up in. And that's why I hope that our public education system is rigorous, and I think they have been, increasingly devoted to helping people understand how not to fall down the rabbit hole, how not to be subject to misinformation, how to be critical in your source of information, how to seek out multiple sources of information, rather than just reading what's spoon-fed you by an algorithm. And that's becoming increasingly important. And we will be increasingly dedicated to providing information about the true science so that people can make decisions. And as that increases, so will the vaccination rate. We're going to continue that effort.
From Lake Washington, Kevin has our next question.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm a senior at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, and my question for Governor Inslee is, at what point does societal well-being outweigh individual liberty?
Well, obviously there's no, metric, 5.5 on the liberty scale or 7.3 on the security scale. I can't give you any sort of metric on that. What I can say is that we have had, in the context of vaccines, this has been a well-accepted American tradition of recognizing the necessity of protecting ourselves from communal threats. And we generally have recognized that people do not have the right, by the Constitution or anything else, to force me to breathe their tobacco smoke in a restaurant. Nobody has a right to force me to breathe their tobacco smoke. They also do not have a constitutional right to force me or you to breathe their COVID virus. And that the community has a right to protect ourselves from this virus or from anyone spreading this virus. So going back to the very first days of our national experiment, when George Washington required his troops to get vaccinated against smallpox, he required it. This is before even the Constitution was adopted. And that set a national legacy of accepting requirements that people get vaccinated. It has been in our schools for decades. It has been in our military for centuries, literally. So we have recognized the ability or the right for citizens to be protected from being infected from somebody else's virus. So I would say in that one context, we've recognized the community's interest in health and safety, and it's been well recognized and has been successful in many regimes in many realms. So that's one answer, but I know there are many, many other contexts where we wrestle with those issues.
Moving on to a question about social justice. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hello, my name is Jessica Laing, and I am a high school senior attending Lake Washington High School in Kirkland, Washington. Society was forced to reconcile with the realities of police brutality in the United States through the public display of George Floyd's murder. It is also clear that Washington has a history of police violence, from the death of Manuel Ellis in Tacoma to Kevin Peterson Jr. in Vancouver. It is important that we as a state consider criminal justice reform. My question to you is, what specific steps is Washington State planning to take to improve policing in a way that doesn't disproportionately target Black and Brown individuals?
Well, I appreciate that question, a very important one. Fortunately, I can tell you we have been very, very active in this realm. The legislature passed, it's either 11 or 12 bills last session of the legislature, which I signed, which took a whole series of efforts to try to reduce police violence and make sure that it's not based on any racist tendencies or activities. And those things included different ways of training officers. It included when officers can intrude on someone's liberty where they can stop individuals. It had new ways of restricting the ability for police chases that became dangerous. It restricted the use of certain weapon systems in certain conditions. And so with your permission, I'll try to send you a list of those bills so that you can take a look at them. And we led the nation in this. I think now we have some of the best police accountability laws in the United States. And we have initiated now investigations in some of the measures you indicated. I've instituted investigations of the Ellis case, and we have stood up or will be standing up a separate state agency that will be responsible for investigating police violence with citizens. So it will be a separate agency to prevent the appearance of any conflict of interest in local police departments investigating themselves or their colleagues. So this is a good thing that we'll have an independent group that will investigate when there is police citizen violence. So I can say there's a lot that's been done, and I know that there will be more to be done in the future.
Aya from Lake Washington has a question about housing.
Hi, my name is Aya Abdulkader, and I am a senior at Lake Washington High School in Kirkland. My question concerns Section 8 housing. So, as we know, homelessness is a very prevalent issue in Washington State, especially in King County, where I'm from, and waiting lists for Section 8 housing are insanely long and not keeping up with the homeless population. So, I would like to know, is there anything you're planning on doing to reform this process and help our homeless population? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you know, our state has put in under my budgets hundreds of millions of dollars to increase access to housing, including in Section 8 housing. But obviously, it's not enough. So I will be proposing additional measures in January. When we have our session in January, I'll propose a budget in December, and it will include millions and millions of more dollars for housing. To what extent it's in Section 8 as opposed to different measures, that's just one of the measures of how we provide low-income housing in our state. And so I think I hope you'll be pleased by our very vigorous proposal for additional support. Now, I can't tell you that's going to eliminate homelessness in our state. It has been driven by a whole lot of problems we've had, including the fact that rents have been driven up because we're such a successful state. So many people are moving here, right? More people are moving here than we're building housing. And that's driven housing costs up in spectacular fashion. So we're chasing that tail of economic success. I have to tell you, as governor, it's a great frustration that we have one of the most successful economies in the United States. And as a result, we've had increased homelessness because rents have gone up so fast. So we have to build more housing, and that will be one of the agenda items when I propose things in January. So I also will note that our efforts have been not just Section 8 housing. We need housing throughout the system. We need to look at low entry housing and tiny housing, which can be done very, very rapidly to increase housing. Look, we need additional housing units that are available. We need additional roofs. Just Section 8 housing is good, but it won't solve the problem. because we simply have too many people coming in and out of roofs. So the creation of new housing itself is extremely important in this effort, and we will take measures to address that. So stay tuned. Please talk to your legislator and tell them to vote for my budget. Just tell your legislator, they don't have to do any independent thinking. Just vote for my budget and everything will be solved.
Joining us next is Sydney. Go ahead, Sydney.
Hi, I'm Sydney, and I am also from Lake Washington High School. My question is also regarding homelessness. So, as you kind of touched on earlier, what is your strategy as to how to help the homelessness rate in Washington? And how can high school students like myself help support your effort?
You bet. Well, first, I'll answer your first question. Second question, I hope you'll get to know your legislator. And I'm serious about this. I hope you'll get to know them. I hope you'll meet them. I hope you'll talk to them. I hope you'll write them emails and TikToks and everything else that's cooking nowadays in your system. In every way you can to get to know your legislator. I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll make that a lifetime habit. Obviously, I hope you will vote. Okay. I hope you'll register as soon as you can and vote and get all your friends and colleagues and cousins to vote as well. Our strategy, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but our strategy is to have a multifaceted approach. There's no silver bullet to the housing crisis. We have to do many things, not just one thing. We have to provide first more housing. We have to build more housing. Everything from tiny houses to, buying apartment units or buying hotels that aren't used and turn them into low-income housing, to building low-income housing through our housing trust fund, which I've supported with hundreds of millions of dollars. We have to do all the spectrum of building new housing to make more housing available. We have to support more people through Section 8 housing vouchers and the like. But we also have to provide support for some people who need additional support in addition to just a roof. And that means greater access to mental health services. Many, not all, certainly, but many of our people need mental health assistance to get back up on their feet. We have to make that available. We have to make that easily available where they live, so they don't have to drive 30 miles to get a mental health treatment. Now that's a challenge because we don't have enough mental health providers in our state. That means we have to educate more psychologists and psychiatrists, and we have to inspire more people of your age to go into mental health professions. And you can't do that overnight. So I want to point out that our solutions need deep resonance. We have to grow psychologists so they can provide mental health services, so we can get people to be capable of being either self-sufficient or at least living in a low-cost housing unit. We need to have a better chemical addiction treatment for people, obviously, that need it, that is not adequately available, which means we need to train more chemical addiction specialists. That's a multi-year project. We need to provide additional vocational training for people to help them get a new skill. First, you deal with your chemical problem, you deal with your mental health problem, you get into long-term housing, and you get vocational assistance to get a job so you can become self-sufficient. It's a train of things we need to do to help people. All of those things are necessary, and all of those things we have made big investments on while I've been governor, and we'll increase, and we will, if the legislature will help me next session, we'll increase those things significantly, I hope.
Holly from Lake Washington has our next question.
Hi, my name is Holly Gardner, and I'm a senior at Lake Washington as well. And my question is, with the new vaccine mandate for teachers, how do you plan on supporting students' education if there aren't enough teachers to support the existing number of students?
Well, fortunately, we've lost very few teachers. We've had a very high compliance. We're like 98% in many of our districts. I'm not sure what it is for the kangaroos, but we've been very successful in losing very few educators. Obviously, every teacher counts, and we're going to try to provide schools, in ways that they see how we can help them if they have lost some teachers. I have been very supportive of the teaching profession throughout my career, including getting the biggest teacher pay increase in American history a couple of years ago. We have to help them through compensation and support. I've been very supportive of teacher education by giving them additional educational opportunities. So I'll continue to help any way that I can. But getting more young people to go into education in college is perhaps the best thing I can do. So I'll start by hoping several of you will go into education and go get a degree and teach. And that's the best thing that we can do to try to make that accessible so that everybody can afford to go to college who wants to be a teacher, including increasing the diversity in our teaching ranks. We need more diversity in our teaching ranks. We want more teachers of diverse ethnicities so that students can see themselves in their teachers. And that's a big part of our effort. It's one of the reasons we've been so dedicated to increasing scholarships. And we, as I've said, we have the richest scholarship program now in America so that we can, have people, BIPOC people, kids in poverty can afford a college education so they can become educators. And we will continue that effort. I hope several of you will think about that as a career. It's a great career. I come from a line of teachers. My dad was a teacher. My brother's a teacher. My brother and sister-in-law are both teachers. And it's a great profession.
Moving on to a question about governance. We have Ciara from Open Window.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you for taking my question. My name is Ciara, and I'm an 8th grade student at Open Window School. Many of the heads of agencies and departments who enact law in Washington state are appointed by you, the governor. Do you believe that these positions should be independently elected to make our state more bipartisan?
I don't think I would change the system we have now. In fact, I might change it the opposite direction. I don't think elections necessarily are increased by partisanship. I don't see any reason to believe that that would happen. If we had an elected secretary for the person who runs the prison system right now, I appoint that person. If that person was elected, I don't see any reason to believe that would become a more bipartisan effort, to be honest with you. I actually think if I was going to change anything, it'd be in the opposite direction. We have like the most elected positions of almost any state in the United States. So most states, they'll have the AG Attorney General will be appointed by the governor or the Secretary of Agriculture, or the insurance director will be appointed by the governor instead of elected. So we have the most distributed system of almost any state. I argue that gives you less accountability in some sense, because right now you can't blame me for what the insurance commissions are doing because I don't run the insurance agency. So I'm not accountable for that. I would rather have more accountability that I can give to the public so you can hold somebody accountable. So I probably would not want to go in that direction.
Gautier has our next question.
Hello, I'm Gautier. I'm a high school senior at Lake Washington High School. And my question for Governor Inslee is, what is your opinion on instituting term limits for Governor of Washington State?
Well, I'm for term limits the old-fashioned way, which is you vote the people out if they're not doing a good job. And I think that has suited us quite well. And by the way, that happened to me one time. I was unelected in 1994. The voters decided they wanted to go a different direction than I did. So it happens. I don't think term limits is a solution to what ails us. I think getting more people to vote is the most important thing on how to increase democracy. I think to get people to agree to the election results is a very important thing right now, and that's very much in doubt because we have a person who lost the election running around saying he won the election for the presidency. That's very dangerous in our democracy. So I think there are the gerrymandering that goes on. If you guys have learned about gerrymandering, that basically people have drawn legislative districts to favor one party or another, that's a problem right now. I think that needs fixing in our democracy. I think the filibuster is a problem in our democracy that allows a small minority to block the majority will in the US Senate is a problem. So our democracy needs some significant repair, but I don't think that is one that would really increase accountability. Look, we get to vote. If people vote, they'll get what they want. We just got to encourage more people to vote.
Open Window School, we have Henry.
Hello, my name Or hello, Governor Inslee. My name is Henry Mason from Open Window School. I've seen and heard that your main priorities are about climate change and clean energy jobs, and you have implemented a goal of reducing our carbon emissions to below 40% by 2035. But how can we as voters be sure that this goal is followed through?
I'm sorry, that your school has followed through, you asked?
That this goal is followed through.
Oh, okay. Well, you can vote. And if we didn't do it, you can vote us out of office. And I hope you do vote out of office people that haven't worked in that direction. That's the ultimate accountability. And that's why I'm encouraging people to vote. I can tell you, I've done everything humanly possible I can to reach these goals. I've been unfortunately restricted by some of the legislators who haven't passed some of the things that I've proposed yet. And we could use a few more legislators who think like I do, who will adopt some of the measures we need. Now, we have made progress on this. I want to tell you that you should be proud of our state. We do have the best climate change laws in the United States today. We just passed a cap and invest bill. It caps pollution economy-wide. It's the best in the United States. We also have a new clean fuel standard that will give consumers cleaner fuels. But some of the legislators want to sue me to repeal that right now. I'd love them to be held accountable, saying, knock it off. We need a clean fuel standard. Don't repeal it, for goodness sakes. So I need some more legislators in the legislature who will help do good things against the climate beast. But I'm doing everything I can. You don't have to worry about me. By the way, I love your school because you do have open windows. I get to see the trees behind you in the windows, and it's very scenic. It's beautiful. And I'm very concerned. I'm not sure if that's, I can't tell what kind of tree it is behind you, but our cedar trees right now are very in trouble because of the drought and the heat dome that we had this summer. If you look at our cedar trees, they have brown at the tips of them because they've been so stressed. And we're very concerned about their health. Both the heat and the drought has made them more susceptible to beetle kill in the upcoming winters. We're very concerned about that. So I encourage you to hold politicians accountable through your voting patterns.
Our last question, but certainly not least, is from Jan.
Hello, Governor Inslee. My name is Jan from Open Window School. As a representative from political party, what are your thoughts on education for students on civic engagement and political parties? What schools should teach and at what age?
Well, I think it's really important that we embed civics. We have, as you know, we've passed a law year before last to bring civics back into our curriculum. I think it's very, very important. It's always been important, but it's particularly important now through this phenomenon of the internet. I talked about that. I think having people understand the basics of government that they own is very important, but particularly now to help students understand how to get the truth through multiple sources of information so that they can make the appropriate political decisions. It's really, really important. At what level that should start, I don't know the magic. I think that, by the time you're in 5th and 6th grade, you're starting to have some basic understanding of how democracy works. So I would hope that by that level, we're starting to talk about that kind of issue, certainly by that instructional level. My 12-year-old certainly has a good grasp of this, and it's not just because his grandpa's a governor. So I would hope that it starts and continues throughout that period. And we just need it. Look, the fact that we still have, great pockets of 20% of the people not voting in some places is really painful. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to advance that. And I want to thank your teachers for doing that. By the way, your teachers are incredible. The education you are receiving is amazing compared to what, frankly, I had. When I see the quality of education that you're receiving, it's remarkable. The team teaching, the evidence-based, the project-based learning that you're involved in, the Running Start program that you have available to you, it's fantastic. And your educators are doing a tremendous job. And if I'd had the kind of education you have, I could have made something out of myself. So thank your teachers for me, and your custodial staff, and your bus drivers, and your cooks and chef and janitors. You're doing a great job.
Well, Governor, that's all our questions for today. But if you'd want to share some final words, some messages of inspiration maybe for our students.
Well, I'm very inspired by your questions. They show such a high level of sophistication at an early age. When we get down, we are inspired by the new generation that's coming out. It's the smartest generation ever. And I'm not kidding when I say that. It is the best educated generation in our state's history. The science, you understand, didn't exist when I was in high school. Literally, when I read my godson's biology textbook, my dad was a biology teacher. My dad didn't know half that he was studying as a senior in high school, in Bainbridge High School. So you are the best educated, and I want you to put it to use in some publicly spirited way. And I hope you'll think about public service in some way, in any different way, from teaching to law enforcement to healthcare, whatever it is. I hope you put your genius to work. So I'm inspired by the high level of questions you posed to me. I really appreciate it. I know when you vote, you're going to make great decisions. I want to ask you a favor, though. You don't get to ask a question of the governor for nothing. There's a payment involved in this. And that is that I would ask that you all send me your top 2 favorite songs that you enjoy now. And if you can get that, I'm sure you can figure out a way to get that to me. So if you can help me, TVW, to get that to me, their favorite songs, if you can help me, I would appreciate it. When I went to meet and talk to my governor when I was a senior in high school, we won the state championship in 1969. I went to meet him, and I came to this office that I'm sitting in right now to meet him, but he was gone that day, so I didn't get to meet him. It was Dan Evans, but I got to meet the lieutenant governor, Ludlow Kramer. So I got to have a discussion with him, and I can tell you, I am sure that my questions were not as articulate and sophisticated as yours were today. So I want to thank you, and I'll look forward to hearing your favorite songs so I can get to know some good music.
Governor, we're dying to hear what your top 2 favorite songs are.
So number 1 is Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from the musical Oklahoma. And when I drive, sometimes I get to drive my grandkids to school and we sing it. And I know this sounds crazy, but I've got an 8 and a 9-year-old who sing that song on the way to school in the morning. Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. Check that out. What's number 2? I'll have to come up with a Beach Boys song. And I'll have to say this may sound misogynistic, but it's East Coast Girls. So if you know the song, East Coast Girls are hip. I dig the clothes they wear. And I used to sing that when I was 14 with my best friend all the time.
Nice. It must bring back a lot of good memories.
Oh, they go way back, farther than you can imagine.
All right. Well, that wraps up our episode of Connects. We'd like to thank you again, Governor. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and to our students from Lake Washington and Open Window School. And we hope to see you again next time.
Thank your teachers for me and your parents. They should be proud. Good luck.
Thank you.